Hi everybody. I'm going to show you the hopefully final layers of some darker shadows in my portrait. So in my demo work that I have done so far, I kind of moved around a little bit, but everything has a couple of layers of those warm tones that I talked about. I haven't finished a lot of the features, but what I'm going to do is come back over here to the left side of the face, and I'm going to add some of those darkest of shadows that I see in the photograph. So I'm going to kind of ignore parts of the right side of the face for now, and I'll kind of leave those empty. But let's pick up where we left off, especially on the left side. So got a little bit of a start with the darker kind of laying in of the eye. But I'm going to take my somewhat big kind of round brush, and what I've got here is ultramarine blue. I've got some burnt umber. This is raw umber, burnt sienna, and some cadmium red. So what I'm going to start with is I'm actually going to pick up some of my blue, because this is for my last kind of darkest layer of my skin tone, my shadow. I'm going to go ahead and put some blue in that to cool it down. So you can see a combination of burnt umber and blue makes quite a nice black. Of course, the more blue I add to it, the cooler it becomes. But I'm also going to include a little bit of burnt sienna in that, and maybe also a touch of my red as well. Now, the more of those warm tones that I add, so obviously the warmer that shadow becomes. And if I feel like I need to go cooler with my blue, again, I can come back to that. I can add some more. But let's go ahead and start with this mix. And over here on the left side, I'm going to put a layer of that where I notice it getting quite a bit darker. And I'm going to kind of include the shape of the eyebrow in that shadow as well. I'm going to bring that down along the side of the face. Moves in on the cheekbone a little bit. And I want to keep working quickly here. And what I'm doing is adding a little more of my cadmium red, because I see a little more of that kind of showing up here in the shadow on the left side of the nose. And I'm also going to put a little of that warmer red that I notice here in the forehead, and then run that also along that shadow that I put here on the side of the face. And I'm going to go back and take some of that paint out of my brush. I'm going to blot my brush a little bit and just soften that transition so that it kind of moves into the lighter areas of the face a little more gradually. And I'll move my brush along the edge of that shadow here along the nose as well. And pull some of that up. And I'm going to connect some of those here where the mouth kind of meets the cheek a little bit. And moving some of that red up under the eye. Moving a blotted brush along that edge, continuing to soften it just a little bit. And I don't want to go over it too much because I don't want to overwork it. But now that I have some of those darker tones on the left side of the face, there may be places where I still feel like perhaps I could warm it up just a little bit with some red. And there might even be some places around the eye itself that I can darken a little bit as well. So mix up just a little more of what I just used, those three colors plus a little bit of red. And it looks like maybe along the corner of the eye. It gets fairly dark as well, so I'm going to kind of emphasize that shape. And then I'm going back along the bottom of the nose, around the shape of the nostril as well. And I could still deepen a lot of these colors that I'm using, that I'm layering on top of what is already has a couple of layers on it. But I want to give it a little bit of connection, a little bit of context with what's already painted right in my face. So if I come over here to the left side of the face, it stays fairly dark in these sections, but I also want to kind of move that around and underneath those features like the nose to kind of push them forward a little bit, right? I wanted that kind of three-dimensional effect. Now, once I start to work on features like the mouth, there may be, some more changes in terms of color that I may be wanting to add, and I can certainly, fill those in as I continue there. But I think while I'm working with the darks, I'm going to go ahead and put some of that very darkest of black that I see in the hair, just so that I get all the way to the darkest of my values, at least in the course of this quick demo here. So I'm picking up just the ultramarine blue, the raw umber, and I'm going to keep with those two colors, right? Get a nice rich black. Now, if this is mostly dry, now I can go back in with my brush and start to look for how to kind of frame the face and the head with this darkest of blacks. It's good to have a lot of this mixed up, right? So that you have enough to kind of pick up with with your brush as you're working. And you can also blend it with the skin tone on the rest of your forehead if you've kind of use that skin tone all the way up the head is a good idea, right? Even further than you think you need it, so that you can have that skin tone lying underneath the hair. Think of the hair as something that you put on top, right, of your skin tone. And the shape of the hair along the edge of the head kind of moves in on the temples a little bit like that. Comes back up. And one thing I'm going to do here along the edge of the hair is also kind of run my brush along the edges just to kind of soften the bridge between the hair and the skin tone. And I'm going to put just another puddle of that nice dark black, right along there to make it nice and dark. And then one thing I'm going to be able to do, especially here along the scalp and the top of the hairline, is to skip my brush along those edges a little bit so it's not completely solid everywhere. I won't finish that whole effect in this quick demo, but let's indicate what I'm hoping to do a little bit. All right. So if I continue this effect, you know, picking up on the right side of the head, obviously you would have just a little bit of the white of the paper showing through along the scalp line up there, but we don't need a whole lot of that visible. And then just let some of that trail off into the scalp a little bit. Now, if I need something else I could still continue doing, I feel like the perspective is skewed a little bit from my angle. Something I could still continue doing is adding a little more to, for example, there might be a couple of stray hairs that I could add here and there to the edge of the head to just make it look a little less of a solid piece, right? These are strands of hair. They kind of frame the face a little bit, right? And I can continue working with the shape of the head. Now, something about to consider with the background space is that if you, for example, if you're planning on doing something with a background, you might wait to do these very delicate kind of edge work kind of lines, brush work, until you've done that because you want those to overlap, right? And so you want to be able to paint on top of that. But if I were to continue with the darker shapes, this is something that obviously I would continue with the right side of the head, right? So I would continue to paint that, obviously. Kind of let that alone for now. But one thing I also want to think about is as the shape of the head comes together, right? So if this continues something like here, right? I'm going to have all of this nice and dark, right? So it's not going to be nice and dark in terms of the value, right? So that's going to frame the head a little better. That will bring in the edge of the forehead a little more, right? So that's going to be a little more proportionate, right, as I finish that out. But I'm also going to probably switch to a smaller brush at some point because there are going to be places underneath the nose, for example. What I've done here is use that same basic kind of hair color that I just mixed up, the really super dark one. And I would put in those darker shadows that create the shape of the nostrils, right? So I'm switching to my smaller brush. Would paint in those darker shapes. In there, it's going to go a long ways in terms of creating both the three-dimensional effect of something like a nose, right? It comes out from the face a little bit, but also getting the shape of the nostrils right can go a long ways to making it look like that real, you know, like that actual person, okay? So putting in those darker shadows, don't be afraid of doing that because that's really what's going to help kind of push your painting over the edge in terms of creating that sense of realism. So the last stages of the painting, you know, if I were looking at the left side of the painting as my finished side, the darker shapes in the mouth themselves, right, the corners of the mouths, I've got a little bit of that on the right, but I don't have that on the left of the painting yet, so I want to put those darks in there. And the only difference is that I might be using just a little more of that cadmium red, right, in the shape of the mouth. But the thing about the mouth is that it is skin just like the rest of the face, so it shouldn't feel separate, right? It should feel like those darker skin tones that you have everywhere else in there, but perhaps just with a hair more of that cadmium red mixed into that, right? So that would be my plan for finishing up the corner of the mouth. And maybe I'll do that just real quickly here. So I'm talking about it and thinking about it. Let's do it. We've got that dark color, just a little more of that cadmium red mixed into it. Also quite dark here on the lower lip, right? Oftentimes the lower lip catches the light because it's facing upward, but it's got some really dark shadow, especially on the underside of it and over here on the left. And what I'll do is pick up a little bit of that cadmium red as I'm kind of moving to the right, but that upper lip is very much in shadow. And as I move to the right, I just kind of soften that a little bit. I'm also gonna let some of this kind of dark color that I just put on the left side here move out to the surrounding area of the mouth, right? Because it's not all contained within the shape of the lip. And then right along the corner of the mouth, I'm still gonna add even more, right? Dropping that darker value in there. And then it kind of, there's a line there along the smile, and it creates, more of that kind of stronger expression. And it could be that along the upper lip, one thing I may think about doing on the upper lip here is also adding just a tad of that warmer tone underneath the nose, but connecting the upper lip, right? So I've got that shadow here. And then kind of connects with the upper lip too. Running a little more of a dry brush up against it, right? To kind of pick up some of that a little bit. Push that over just a hair. All right, so as I continued painting over here on the left, I do have some darks now on the left side, the left corner of the face, but I may want to keep going with that, right? I think there are still maybe a couple more lines that I could get a little bit darker with in the eye, just to kind of set the darkness of that shape back into the head a little bit further, right? But that gives, maybe a little more of a sense in terms of how to continue with those really super dark tones, right? That you'll want to be adding eventually in your portrait. Pick up that little thing that I just splashed on there. All right, hope that helps, guys. Thanks.